Hey, good day, folks, and welcome to another edition of Lumberjack Logic Live. I'm your host, Neil Johnson, and I am very excited to be with you and very excited to share the news with you today because Democrats are hiding behind J.B. Pritzker in Illinois. Now, interestingly enough, if you were going to choose a governor to hide behind, JB might be your guy, folks. And additionally, we have now the greatest primary race of all time taking place in Texas now because John Cornyn's trying to go mega. I can't wait to get to that. Actually calling for Kash Patel to arrest Democrats. I kid you not. He is desperately fighting for his seat against Ken Paxton down there, who everybody knows has long supported the investigations of the fraudulent elections. So that's going on. We have other great news as well. And then we've got the firing of the Bureau of Labor and Statistics chief over her numbers and her reporting to help the Biden, I'm going to just call it the Biden administration, and actually suppress Trump's. And so Trump's still calling, of course, for those lower rates. We're going to talk about all that today, but there is so much winning going on. And to help celebrate this winning, I'm bringing in a special guest, and that's Philip Patrick. Philip, good to have you on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me, Neil.
Yes. Well, I'm going to start with this, Philip. Let's go here. FBI Director Kash Patel has been asked to help Texas authorities track down and arrest the Democratic lawmakers who fled the state to block a vote on redistricting. The governor and legislature have sent out warrants for their arrest. They'll be brought in one way or another. Now, this, interestingly enough, was signed by John Cornyn. Everybody knows that John Cornyn is a rhino, but here he is. So right here from the United States Senate, the Honorable Kash Patel, I write to encourage the FBI to take any appropriate steps to aid in Texas state law enforcement efforts to locate or arrest potential lawbreakers who have fled the state. As a maneuver to avoid legislative responsibilities on August 3rd, 2025, many members have absconded from the state. Okay, the stated goal was to prevent the legislature from properly meeting in violation of their oath of office. In a representative democracy, we resolve our differences by debating and voting, not by running away. Some Texas legislators have fled to New York and others have fled to Illinois. Interestingly enough, they are getting lavish treatment, and this was planned months in advance. We have now found out through J.B. Pritzker. So that's what's going on there. Kathy Hochul is saying they are being lavishly treated. I'm sure not on the taxpayer dollar, Philip. That would never happen in New York.
Never.
Never. Okay, and to finish it up, this is a time-sensitive matter. The Texas legislature is currently in special session called by Governor Abbott with around 2 weeks left. As Abbott noted, when a governor calls a special session, the legislature shall meet. The absence of a quorum prevents key votes on important areas of concern for Texas. For example, the recent Kerrville floods, which caused unbearable tragedy and destruction, is just one issue that needs to be addressed in this legislative session. So yes, they are avoiding this legislative session simply because they are concerned about redistricting. Now, where was this? This was a different tab. What do we got here? I feel at least one term Republicans didn't handle House Democrats this way. Well, we don't have a governor. That's good. Where did that go, though? Here, let me just show you something. There's been this map floating around, folks. I want to talk about this Maryland gerrymander. Here we go. So this is the map. If you guys haven't seen this is the map of one of the legislative districts in Maryland. Now, this was defeated, but I want to show you how disingenuous the Democrats are. This was their gerrymandering to get another Democrat seat in, well, this was actually a Republican district. But what they did was they drew this around all these other areas so they could hold more Democrat seats in Maryland. This was actually defeated in court. So the new map looks like this, but these maps are still off the mark, okay? So even though it's not gerrymandered that badly, these maps still do not actually reflect, okay? So you can look at this here. And I'm not going to get into all of that here today, but just know that the Democrats are up in arms supposedly about gerrymandering, but actually they love it. But what really has them up in arms, and I need to share this 1-minute clip from the venerable Nicole Wallace of MSNBC. Folks, they are freaking out right now, absolutely freaking out because indictments are coming. Mark my words. I know a lot of you are not believers. You're thinking, now they're going to be this grand jury and Neil, no one's going to jail. No indictments are coming. Watch, mark my words. The indictments are coming. Bookmark this. What are we on here? Tuesday, August 5th. Bookmark it. I said it. Indictments are coming.
Some more news breaking this hour to tell you about. Attorney General Pam Bondi has ordered a grand jury investigation into the so-called Russiagate conspiracy allegations made by the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard. A senior Trump administration official confirms to NBC News. That investigation was first reported by Fox News. These are unsubstantiated and largely debunked allegations by the Trump administration that former President Barack Obama and his aides in the intelligence community ordered a probe into the 2016 Trump campaign's connections to Russia to ruin his chances of becoming president. The source tells NBC News that a letter signed by Pam Bondi instructs an unnamed federal prosecutor to begin presenting evidence to secure potential indictments, although it is unclear what the charges would be and exactly who the grand jury will be targeting. We'll stay on top of that story. Thank you for letting us into your homes.
Pause her face. Look at her. She looks so excited, folks. Doesn't she look excited? Oh, gosh. These people are so freaking pathetic. I can't with it. I can't, Philip. These people are unbelievable to me. They went on for years promoting the Russia collusion, the fake Hunter Biden laptop, and now they're talking to us about unsubstantiated claims when we actually have real documents. This is wild. Have you been watching this?
Yeah, it's an absurdity, and I think it's just a distraction from what's really happening. But it's crazy. The Democratic Party had an opportunity with President Trump to reshape and reform. They have lost touch with reality. They don't stand for anything. They don't. It's become an absolute disaster. And like I said, with President Trump getting elected, in my mind, this was the opportunity for the Democratic Party to reshape. And they have not done that at all. They're still sort of hanging on to pathetic things from the past instead of sort of looking inwards and trying to stand for something. It's a mess. Politics in general is a mess.
It is a mess. And it affects everything. It's into sports. It's in finance. It's in everything. But the great thing about finance is it tends to draw clear lines. Politics don't affect it as much as people think it does. The things that do affect finance, and Philip, you're with Birch Gold, folks. I'll mention this is my sponsor, Birch Gold. Okay, get your free info kit on gold by texting the word lumberjack to 989-898. No obligation, just useful information. But politics and finance, I always found this interesting because markets tend to respond to market forces, not to politics. Now, it will respond to elections in the sense that they'll say, this is going to be a candidate that will allow the economy to grow, because government cannot necessarily make the economy grow. All government can do is get out of the way of the economy to let it grow. So right now, like Trump is into removing regulations. That spurs economic growth every single time. We are overburdened by regulations.
There's no question about it. And that was the platform that Donald Trump was elected on. This is about a growth boom, which means lower interest rates. It means stimulating economic growth. Ultimately, that's what we need. People have to understand we have a debt issue. Austerity is not going to get us through this. The only way to do it is growth. And you can see how the markets responded to President Trump's election. They knew ultimately he bodes well for the markets. Now, there's a lot of stuff there that he needs to work through. This is going to be a bumpy road. We're starting to see now through numbers and other things that the picture isn't as rosy as perhaps we thought it was. And that's to be expected. The scale of the problem that President Trump inherited is not a joke. This is the toughest situation from an economic standpoint any president in modern history has inherited. And I think he's the best guy for the job, but it's going to be an uphill battle. And
oh my gosh, that what he inherited is unbelievable. I mean, and there is a certain economic reality I do want to bring up. It's good for governance, but there are certain things that when you start pulling all these illegals out of, which we need to do, But I mean, over 1 million have self-deported, plus all the people that they've deported out of the country. We're probably up to, I'm going to guess, somewhere around 1.5 million to 2 million deportations right now, from what I'm seeing, either through self-deporting or through forced deportations. And then the border is effectively shut down. But when you do bring those people out, there's going to be a certain economic impact in your locale. And what I mean by that is the government not giving away that money is good. But you're still, there's got to be some initial feel of that until taxes are filed in the locales. There has to be.
I mean, absolutely. We're removing a large section essentially of cheap labor. There's a lot of industries, hospitality, construction, and others that rely on that. And of course, there's going to be a big gap. The question is whether we as Americans will step in and take those jobs. If the answer is yes, ultimately it bodes well for unemployment and for economic growth. If the answer is no, then we have an issue and we have a shortage. So we're starting to see that play out. But like I said, it takes time for reality to sort of match. We're starting to see the effects, though. We're seeing inflation creep up. We're seeing unemployment creep up. And these are the red flags that we've been expecting for a while that haven't seen up until now. But absolutely, immigration will have a huge effect on the economy.
Well, I always said, and I don't know. I mean, you know, some of the things Trump has done have amazed me so much, but I've always said it has to get worse before it gets better, because you have to go through some cutting and some surgery to make things happen the right way. Again, smash that like, folks. Do chat in with where you're from. See who's on the stream. I see a number of you: Katerina, Lisa, Douglas. Good to see y'all, Stephanie. But I want to let me ask you this: what do you think the economic impact of the Russia hoax could be? Kind of a different question for you, but 3/4 right now, 73% of voters following Russiagate hoax very closely think that Obama officials committed serious crimes. So 3/4 of U.S. voters who follow the news of the investigation of the Trump-Russia collusion hoax think it is likely Obama administration officials committed serious crimes to foster the false narrative used to smear and impeach Donald Trump. Referencing DNI Tulsi Gabbard's report concluding that then President Barack Obama's national security team manipulated and manufactured intelligence to promote false narrative about Russia and Donald Trump. A Rasmussen poll of U.S. likely voters conducted just recently here, folks, within the last week. How likely is it that the Obama administration officials committed serious crimes in manipulating intelligence? Fully 73% of voters who follow this closely say, yeah, that's happened. More than 2/3 say it's very likely that officials are guilty of serious crimes. Okay, so that they are guilty, they need to be prosecuted. What's really interesting, and I found this to be extremely fascinating, even 32% of Democrats believe this, folks. Now, this is not your obviously completely brainwashed Democrats, but this is kind of wild that large of a percentage of Democrats feel that Obama did commit, you know, these high crimes. And I'm curious, as we watch this shakeout, I don't know what kind of disruption this will cause in the economy. If we see the arrests we're longing for, it's certainly going to cause some turmoil.
Yeah, and I think disruption is probably a good word. First of all, the more information that comes out, the more apparent it is that there was absolutely meddling done on the side of the Democrats. Look, does it have a direct impact on the economy? No, right? This isn't fiscal policy. We're not talking about raising or lowering interest rates, but what we are talking about is infighting. It's instability. We have globally at the moment a trust issue, right? It's
Yes.
largely what's sparking de-dollarization and other things. And I think this stuff ultimately works against the trust in our institutions. And I think longer term, it doesn't bode well for the economy. Is there going to be, a market crash, 10% drop on the back of it? I don't think so. But like I said, it's part of the bigger picture. Trust is eroding in our institutions, and trust has been the cornerstone of dollar supremacy for a long, long time. So I just think ultimately we need to get our house in order. We have to stop the infighting. We need some clarity of policy, and I think that's going to ultimately help us through this. What we're seeing now is a lot of instability, a lot of fighting, a lot of backwards and forwards, and ultimately this doesn't bode well longer term. So we need to get this ironed out and move on.
I think the bigger concern is just the infighting within the Republican Party, which is why I led with the whole thing with John Cornyn, because John Cornyn has been a thorn in the Trump administration's side all this time. And now all of a sudden, because of redistricting in Texas, he's writing Kash Patel, trying to act more mega, more make America great again than his chief competitor in the Texas Senate race, which is Ken Paxton. And I think, these types of things that kind of solidify Republicans, if gerrymandering does that, I don't care what it is, but we need to get some sort of solid consensus amongst the Republicans. Now, I'm going to go to this, since we were talking economy a little bit. I'm going to bring this up here. This is dealing with the unemployment numbers. I don't know how many of you saw this last week, but the Bureau of Labor and Statistics chief got canned, okay? Was a Biden appointee, okay? Now, I'm going to go down. I'm going to have you guys watch this video first, and then we'll get to her canning. So watch this.
206,000. June jobs report. Non-farm payrolls expands 206,000. And that, of course, is benchmarked against the rearview mirror, which right now is going to be revised. Minus 111,000 is the 2-month revision. And if we look at the unemployment rate, he nailed it. Our buddy nailed it up 0.1% from 4% to 4.1%. 4.1% is the hottest, and we have to go back a ways. Last time we were at 4.1 was November of 21. So you have to go back now to October of 21 to find a higher rate, which was 4.5.
Okay, so he's going back to October of 21. Now, before I ask you a question on this, I want you to look at this. So this is that $41,000 or 41,000 job drop there. But I've been saying that job unemployment numbers are rigged since 2020. They have been. This has been false reporting. And this is why I get so frustrated, because why is it everything that we're hearing from the government has been a lie over these last number of years? Okay, I was just informed that our country's jobs numbers are being produced by a Biden appointee, Dr. Erica McIntyre, the Commissioner of Labor Statistics, who faked the jobs number before the election to try and boost Kamala's chances of victory. This is the same BLS that overstated jobs growth in March 2024 by approximately 818,000, and then again right before the 2024 presidential election in August and September by 112,000. These were records. No one can get them that wrong. We need accurate jobs number. I've directed my team to fire this Biden political appointee immediately. She'll be replaced by someone much more competent and qualified. Important numbers like this must be fair and accurate. They can't be manipulated for political purposes. She said that only 73,000 jobs were added, but more importantly, that a major mistake was made, and 258,000 jobs downward in the prior 2 months. Okay, so this is interesting because we have numbers that are inflated. Now we're having to pull those back out. So actually, I think what is now happening is we're getting to the real numbers. And, this is just, what are your thoughts on this? Because we were told, of course, we had these numbers going up that looked really good. Now we're told numbers are going down. These were kind of unwelcome. What happened here? And we've got the Fed's narrative that robust employment numbers are the strong sign of a strong economy, and of course they can't reduce rates and everything. So what's it say to you?
Yeah, that was the issue for me. So first of all, firing the head of the BLS is kind of a risky move. Markets and economists don't love it, right? Perception risk is high when data agencies are politicized. That being said, this is a system that needs reform. As you mentioned, this has been going back for years now. Data is often outdated by the time it's released, and it's largely because there's a heavy reliance on things like surveys, which can miss real-time shifts in the labor market. And revisions that are this large just show that the measurement process isn't keeping pace with reality. And you mentioned the Fed, and you're exactly right. For months now, they've used strong jobs as their excuse not to cut interest rates. And that excuse now has disappeared, right? Had the BLS come out with these numbers prior to the Federal Reserve meeting, would they have had the catalyst to drop rates earlier? I think so, right? So for me,
well, we're at a point too right now where unusually we have Jerome Powell saying one thing, but part of his board, two members came out opposed. Two members of the Fed came out opposed. That doesn't happen.
No, it does. Look, you'll see splits, but this was split down the middle 50-50. And it's because, you could see both sides of the argument, right? We were working with unemployment data that looked really good, right? Low unemployment, inflation was ticking up. So Powell had his excuse to say, listen, employment's good, inflation's on the rise, let's wait and see. That was the excuse he needed. Had unemployment had he known it was as bad as it is today, there wouldn't have been the catalyst to keep rates where they are. And that's kind of my point. The Fed, the administration, they have to make decisions based on information. When the information is wrong, the decisions become wrong. And that is very problematic. So I think it's a system that needs reform, but there is a deeper issue here, right? The system that tracks the numbers is broken. We know that, right? But we're also dealing in a financial climate. For the first time in a long time, interest rates have been higher than the rate of inflation, and the entire system is breaking under that pressure. That ultimately is the bigger problem. We have a market that is so addicted to low interest rates and cheap money, we can't function any other way. So yes, the BLS needs reform. Honestly, the Fed needs reform. There are some structural changes we need to make, but the bigger problem is debt. It's deficits, this giant debt overhang, and an economy that's essentially a junkie now, addicted to low interest rates and cheap money. That's
and the whole thing too. You can look at the markets themselves. Okay, so you can look at the Dow, the S&P. We are at historically high price to earnings ratios, which are all funded by cheap money, and then also by forcing people into 401ks or IRAs if they want to get some tax-free money and be able to save that. Now they can do that. Actually, I'm going to segue here just quickly, Philip. They can do that with gold. I want to mention that, but most people aren't even really fully aware of that. So they're just buying index funds, which is falsely inflating market values, I believe. Because here's the scoop: if you were to say you had a business and you wanted to sell it to me, would I pay 30 times the earnings for that business? I mean, this got to be something special, but this is the average out there in the S&P. It's probably, I think right now it's like 26, but whatever it is, it is. It's much higher than street value, because a multiple of earnings on a business you'd buy on the street might be 7-8 times earnings, and they're selling at 26 times earnings on average. Something is broken in that.
It's massively broken. Look, at the end of the day, if profits do not follow growth, it's unsustainable. Right? It's very simple, right? It's very simple. Would you invest in a company that's value had grown 6-fold in the same time period that its earnings were up 10%? How do you rationalize it? So I tend to agree.
Yeah. So, there you go. Get your free info kit on gold by texting the word lumberjack to 989898. No obligation, just useful information. You can actually invest in physical, tangible gold and silver, not paper stuff, but actual physical gold and silver, and put that into an IRA or 401k. You can convert existing dollars or, start afresh, all those types of things. So, that's all available through Birch Gold. What do you see let me just ask that question, I guess, Philip, with what's going on in the economy right now, with the employment numbers? Gold has still done very well over the last year, as well as central banks are still buying this stuff up. So what's going on with that? Why are central banks still buying gold in record quantities, even when we are seeing some stabilization here in the U.S. in terms of, I guess, deregulating, actually getting businesses back on track, not dealing with the failed policies of socialism. Where do you see that going now?
Listen, I don't see anything changing. And in fact, central banks have set records for gold buying since 22, essentially when we seized Russia's assets. So 2022, 23, and 24 were central bank annual records. The first 6 months of this year, 25, have set a record for any 6-month period in history. Ultimately, central banks are driven by different things. They're looking at our level of debt. They're looking at our big, beautiful bill and economic policy, right? And they're saying, listen, this bill is going to add to the debt, not reduce it over the next 10 years, right? They're holding huge amounts of US dollars, right? If I'm holding a currency and I'm watching that currency being printed to the tune of $2 trillion a year, debasing the currency, devaluing the currency that I hold, it is a big problem. So central banks around the world have continued to de-dollarize. US dollar holdings by central banks are at 30-year lows. It's a separate issue to the domestic market, boosting manufacturing. That's a different issue. That's why the markets are still holding, but de-dollarization is continuing. The value of the dollar is sliding down about 11% this year. It is the worst start to the year for a dollar since the 70s, since we came off a gold standard. I don't see that pressure easing up anytime soon. We're also starting to see that the cracks in the foundations when it comes to, at least domestically, the economy are starting to appear. We're seeing weaknesses not just in hiring, but in consumer spending, in manufacturing, in housing, you name it. There's problems starting to appear. We're seeing delinquencies on all types of loans, which have doubled since 2023 in a higher interest rate environment. GDP forecasts for the third quarter of this year are looking pretty dismal, about 0.8% growth of the third quarter. So it's not just one bad data point we're talking about, it's part of a pattern. Now, I don't want to get too carried away here. We've seen America rebound from worse, but I think the first step is understanding that the current path isn't working and we need a serious correction. And that's what President Trump is trying to do, but it's going to take some time, and it's a gamble.
You talk about restructuring the Fed, Philip. I talk about ending it, man. That's where I'm coming from. I just think anytime you have a group of people who can print money out of thin air and just determine interest rates at will, I think it's just like something's wrong with that.
I agree, but ending the Fed is absolutely dependent on ending deficit spending. And until we have an administration that is willing to kill the deficit, spend within our means, it's not possible, right? They have to increase the money supply. They're backed into a corner. So my issues with the Fed are a couple of things. One is they're not effective, right? Think about their dual mandate. It's basically stable prices, which they define as 2% inflation, and maximum employment, which historically 4% has been the sweet spot for them. Since the creation of the Fed, inflation has averaged 4%, so double their target. And employment's averaged about 5.8%, almost 50% above their target. So they are an institution which have been ineffective at doing their job since inception. Secondly, I think they, along with politicians, are complicit in just building bubbles over and over again, really since the turn of the century. Listen, we have a dual mandate here: maximum employment, 2% inflation, same as, for example, the Bank of England. However, the Bank of England's dual mandate prioritized stable prices over maximum employment. And that's been part of the issue. Every time we've had a recession, instead of letting markets do what they do and come down and correct, the Fed has decided to step in, juice the economy. And in the process, we've created, in my mind, an unsolvable bubble. And all the while, they're completely unaccountable. Listen, if the army does a bad job, you fire the general. If Besant started bouncing checks out of the Treasury Department, Trump would throw him out on his ear. Powell oversees 40-year high inflation, and there's nothing anyone can do about it. That, for me, is the issue.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, Trump can't fire him. I mean, we know that to be the case. Now he's applying pressure, and I think that's actually good. And there is, they've got the building renovation for whatever dollar amount, that. So he's under investigation for that.
Yeah.
but I tell you what, I'm so excited though that Trump is doing the job he's doing, and I want to share something with you, Philip. You'll find this good because you got that good English accent going on there. So I'm pulling from the Guardian here today. With Trump wreaking havoc here. With Trump wreaking havoc, a question for U.S. Democrats: when will you ever learn? By Timothy Gosh. Nothing is more insufferable than saying, "I told you so." So please forgive me for being insufferable. On September 29, 2023, after a couple months spent in the U.S., I published a column that was well summarized in its Guardian headline: "Unless Joe Biden stands aside, the world must prepare for President Trump 2.0. We can never definitively say what would have happened if, but there's a very good chance that had Biden cleared the way for a Democratic primary in autumn 2023, the strongest candidate could have defeated Trump. The entire world would have been spared the disaster now unfolding."
I moved out of England for a reason, and the Guardian was part of that.
Every time you open them, they're begging for money, by the way.
So, yeah, obviously. Look, the one thing in there that resonated was what I said at the beginning. Like, the Democrats had, I don't know what the Democratic Party stand for today. It's honestly,
that's what they stand for.
It's ridiculous. I was watching Hakeem Jeffries on a podcast, and they were talking about Social Security, and he was like, "Well, everyone deserves it." And listen, I get that. It's called the third rail of American politics, because if anyone wants to touch it, they die, right? It's like a subway, electrified rail. So Social Security is a really tough talking point, right? But he was saying, look, the Republicans are calling it a Ponzi scheme, this and that. And, I think people deserve it. And listen, so do I as well. But there wasn't any sort of recognition that financially there is a massive problem there. It's just, what I saw in it was a desperate politician trying to understand what people thought he should say and just saying it. And that's kind of my point. There's no understanding of the issues. There's no dealing in reality. They don't stand for anything anymore. They're just a political machine. And like I said, President Trump should have taught the Democrats something. Listen to the American people. All this woke nonsense was what lost them the election. They were trying to appease 3% of the population. And in the process, they isolated 60% of the population, and they're not learning. It's crazy.
No.
Whatever.
They keep going further down the road.
Yeah.
Some of them are trying to moderate. It's really funny watching the ones that are trying to moderate, like Fetterman or somebody. And so one of the things that the Democrat Party has always done is they've always lied to get elected, and then the truth becomes revealed once they're in power. Okay, so I saw somebody say, stop giving Social Security to illegals. Matt, you're right, but the problem is even bigger than that when you look out into the future with Social Security. And this is why, I did this one show one time, and I'm telling you what, I ticked some people off there. Carrie, thank you for that super sticker. But I said, do you remember, maybe you don't remember this part of American politics, but do you remember Rick Perry running for president against George Bush in 2000?
Vaguely, yes.
He's the governor of Texas, and he said that Social Security was a Ponzi scheme. Now, the liberal media took him to task. He backed off instead of defending his statement, which I always thought was like the easiest statement in the world to defend, because if you go back and look at the history of a Ponzi scheme, and it was Alberto Ponzi or Alfred, whatever it was. But anyways, his last name was Ponzi. That's how the whole thing came about. But basically, he took money from people on an investment strategy, spent the money wasn't there. That's why it's called a Ponzi scheme. That's what they've done with Social Security. They've spent the money. And so it is a Ponzi scheme. Now, should you get it? Of course, if you paid in, you should get it. Nobody's going to argue that point, because that was the trust of paying this in. I just had to pay my taxes and I paid all this money to Social Security. I don't even think I'll ever see it. Now, my friend, financial advisor, as I was talking about this complaint, he goes, "Oh no, don't worry, Neil, you'll get it. They'll just print more."
He's right.
He's probably right. But that doesn't mean that it's going to be worth anything.
That's my point. And by the way, everything you said, I agree with. Like, you spent your life paying into Social Security. You had a contract with the government. They owe you that money, right? So again, I understand that entirely. I paid in for most of my life as well. But I also understand that long term, it is unsustainable. So, why aren't people talking about reforms to the system, fair reforms to try and fix the issue? But your financial advisor friend was exactly right. What's going to happen is nothing. No politician's going to want to touch it. Even President Trump, right? President Trump is not scared to upset anyone. Even they won't touch Social Security. Like I said, it's the third rail of American politics for a reason. But until we're willing. So what will happen is what your FA said, right? And that is, we're going to keep doing it. We're going to keep running it up. We're going to keep printing money, and we're going to move into a debt trap. We're going to inflate the value of our currency away. Listen, there's two ways out of a bubble. Two. One, let it crash. Let everything drop in half. Unemployment spike is going to be hell for half a decade. It's going to be rough, but we're going to get through it. And when we do, things will be brighter on the other side. Or you do what we've done since the turn of the century. You never let it really crash. It starts to come down, you stimulate it up, you juice the economy, you keep rates low. All we're doing is creating a much bigger problem for somebody to deal with. And all the while, we inflate our currency away. Listen, this isn't a new thing, right? Nation becomes an empire, controls the global money supply, tries to expand the empire, prints money. This is how every empire basically in human history has collapsed, every single one. And we're going down the same path today. And we can all see it happening. We can't stop it.
Do you know what, Philip? I mean, I look back on those times when they were burning the German marks, right? The Deutsche marks. He was worth more as basically like fuel for the fire than it was as money. And do you know one thing that has never been worth nothing, Philip?
I do.
I do too, man. Gold and silver. And it's not only because it's always been, we talk about the gold standard, but, it's always been used as a modicum of monetary exchange, but it's industrial metals. They're both used as industrial metals. They will always have inherent intrinsic value. Were you going to say something? Looked like you were going to say something.
I lost you for about a second, so I wasn't sure. I was. Listen, gold has been used for centuries. You talked about the Reichsmark that got devalued. Those that held Reichsmarks in mid-war Germany, they lost their shirts, right? The value of currency became nothing. Those that had gold has an inverse relationship with currency. As the Reichsmark was falling, gold was going up. Eventually what happened is the Germans came in with a new currency, the Deutschmark. Those that had Reichsmarks, they got very few Deutschmarks. They were worth nothing. Those that had gold, as the Reichsmark fell, gold went up. Those that sold gold for the new currency, the Deutschmark, preserved their buying power. Bring it to today. Central banks around the world holding dollars. We're printing money. Dollars lost 11%. What are they buying? They are buying gold. There were points in my career. I was a banker before I was a precious metal specialist. And, at the turn of the century, I questioned myself whether gold had become a relic, right? And I looked back at the 20th century and I said, look at it. It didn't grow next to the markets. Look this century. Gold has more than doubled most financial markets around the world. And what's interesting is what changed at the turn of the century. It's when we massively started increasing the money supply. So what I have learned is gold is not a relic. What was historically abnormal was the stability of the dollar from 1946 up until 2022. That was unheard of in history. What we are seeing today is a reversion to the norm. And when things revert to the norm, countries, governments, investors, they turn to gold. It's why it's up 25% almost this year, 40% almost over the last 12 months. It's like why, like I said, it's almost doubled the growth of most financial markets this century. It coincides with debt, deficits, and spending, and it's the climate we're in today.
Yeah. So go get yourself some gold, folks. Get yourself some silver. Seriously, I'm so glad I bought this stuff, and I will continue buying it. But I started buying it back when silver was at $19 an ounce, and everybody told me it was too high then. But I'd heard that argument for so long, and I withheld on buying. Oh, well, no, you wait till it comes down. And I'm like, yeah, but it never came down below that 19. I'm so freaking glad I bought then, because it only went up. And now, I don't know what it's at today. Silver is what, 30 something?
37, almost $38. Gold almost 34. Yeah.
Really? Oh, I don't even know. See, I don't even pay it, because like once I started buying it, I don't want to follow the daily trends of it, because then I would turn into thinking I'm smart enough to be a market timer on this stuff. I don't want to do that. I mean, I just don't. I know that eventually I will use it, and at that time, but it's just whatever. So
it'll be there, and it'll be worth more. That's how it goes. It's a commodity. It goes up over time. Your mindset, I think, is the right one for precious metals, for sure.
So there it is, folks. Just if you want to get some more, you get your free info kit on gold by texting the word lumberjack to 9889898. There is no obligation, folks, just useful information. Find out if investing in gold and silver is right for you. You can convert an existing IRA or 401k into physical, like real stuff, gold and silver. So anyhow, Immortal Legend, thank you so much for that super chat. Social Security is unsustainable. Declining birth rates make it even more so, which is true, which is one of the reasons that they propped up illegal immigration. I could do a whole show on that, but the reality is it's destroying the country, and we have people who can't assimilate. There was a congresswoman the other day who shared about her allegiances to El Salvador over the U.S. I think it was one of the countries. I mean, you can't, that doesn't work. So Philip, thanks for joining us, folks. Thanks for joining us today. Smash that like on the way out. Again, leave a comment as you're going, but thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on the next episode. All right.